right. Welcome, everyone. We are returning from executive session with nothing to report, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School Committee to order at 7 o'clock. Just to introduce the members of the committee, we have Mr. Gelfi, Mrs. Holbrook, Vice Chair Mr. Dolan, Superintendent Swenson, Mr. Kevin Marrera, and Mrs. Julie Scoparis, and my name is Susan Prewandowski. Rachel King will be joining us briefly, and Mr. Hammond could not make it this evening. And if you could join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And on our agenda, we'll have the approval of minutes for May 23rd, 2018. Motion to approve by Mrs. Holbrook, second by Mrs. Gilparis. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. And we'll move on to correspondence recognition. Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We recently received two correspondence from the town's Bridgewater's Department of Veterans Services, and I'd like to read those to the committee and the audience this evening. It says, Dear Mr. Swenson, on Saturday, May 19th, 2018, students listed below from the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District participated for 4 hours in placing United States flags on the graves of deceased Bridgewater veterans. The students are Vincent Ferrazzi, James Heaslip, and Ashley Metstry. Each student brought distinct credit to themselves and the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional High School. Please thank all concerned for their recognition of veterans. Yours truly, Roderick K. Walsh, Master Sergeant USA, retired, and he is also the Director of Veteran Services. So we thank all of our students at the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional High School for helping out on that most noble cause. We also have another correspondence from Master Sergeant Walsh, and it says, Mr. Swenson, please express to the members of the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional High School Marching Band, Alexander BRRSC, for his reading of the Gettysburg Address, and Dominic Montero for his reading of General Order Number 11, my appreciation for their attendance and participation in the Memorial Day ceremonies honoring those who lost their lives in service of our great nation. Our country is strong because of such people as your students and staff who took time to remember those Americans who sacrificed their lives for the freedoms we enjoy. They continuously have taken time to contribute to our community, and it's greatly appreciated. Once again, yours truly, Roderick K. Walsh, Master Sergeant USA, retired Director of Veteran Services. So thank you to all of our students who participated in those Memorial Day activities. We truly appreciate all your efforts, as do the veterans. And the last correspondence we have is from NAEYC accreditation of early childhood programming, and it was addressed to Mrs. Dina Medeiros, who's one of our administrators of special education, and it reads, Dear Mrs. Dina Medeiros, congratulations. Your program has received a new 5-year term of the NAEYC accreditation by successfully completing the renewal process. The accreditation of early childhood program commends the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District for its outstanding efforts in maintaining and renewing their accreditation. Your dedication and commitment to continuously improving the quality of your programming by re-engaging the accreditation system is remarkable. So, kudos to Mrs. Medeiros and to Mrs. Thomas from the Student Services Department, soon to be under the direction of Mr. Jovelos, who's here this evening. So congratulations to all of you, Mr. Jovelos. And that is all we have under recognition.
Very nice. All right, we'll move on to educational reports. The 2018-2019 school improvement plans. Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. I am here tonight to present to you the school improvement plans for each individual school. You have those in your packets, and they were sent to you. Really what I'll do is the principals asked me just to share some of the highlights that they have proposed. So I'll share those with you. And starting with the Merrill School, in their school improvement plan, you can see that they are, increasing their technology. Thanks to the ECPO. They're implementing more iPads and tech tubs for each classroom. Ms. Westall and the staff has also done a great job under the second goal of implementing social emotional learning programs in the school. They've had outside presenters come in to work with the staff. They've also formed a social emotional learning committee at the school, and they have several different activities planned for next year. So Ms. Westall is very, very excited about that. At the Mitchell School with Ms. Latender, again, you have her plan, obviously under student achievement. They're continuing to work on the science implementation, especially by grade level, making sure that they're aligned with the current science standards. Obviously, a big push across the district, especially with our new ELA standards, is writing to text. So there'll be a focus on developing written responses, comparing different genres in different pieces of writing. And then obviously, they want to make sure that we're embedding keyboarding skills in each classroom in the second and third grade, because as you know, our MCAS now is taken online, so we want to make sure we have those skills. And obviously, looking at developing some common assessments with our new reading program, the Wonders Reading Program, to help drive some of our instructional practices. And as you know, the last couple of years, we really tried to drive the Google platform in the district, and it's slowly trickling down to the lower levels. So Ms. Latender has that as one of her goals, and obviously adding more STEAM or STEM type of activities at the school. For Mr. Bray over at the Lyle Liberty, obviously Mr. Bray has done a great job with our ST Math program. The Lyle Liberty has really taken that on and implemented it fully. Mr. Bray and several of the other schools were also awarded an ST Math grant, which we're very excited about. So Mr. Bray has that as one of his continued highlights. Mr. Bray and the staff have also implemented PBIS, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. They started that this year, and they actually had a new school mascot, so they used the lion, the Lyle Liberty Lions, and you probably, if you're a parent of a Lyle Liberty student or around town, you've seen some of the spirit wear that they have over there, and there's actually a big lion, obviously a stuffed animal one in the office right behind Ms. Chickering, which is great to see. Obviously, one of the other things that Mr. Bray is highlighting is our emergency response procedures, obviously with our Rainham Police and Fire Departments, and conducting our ALICE drills. And then Mr. Bray also wants to go ahead and look at arrival and dismissal procedures under school operations. As you know, parking is somewhat limited at the Lyle Liberty as well as other sites across the district, so that's certainly a goal next year. Mr. Swenson and I have talked about that with Mr. Fox, our Director of Facilities, and Detective Pacheco, our School Resource Officer on the Rainham side, looking at what possibilities could exist or do exist for us to expand parking over there. The Williams School, Mrs. Kirk and her staff, obviously they're, again, tying one of their goals into the Wonders Reading Program. They're going to be piloting some of the fluency assessments, moving away from DIBELS that we currently give in some of our lower grades. Grade 4 is going to be using the assessments that go along with Wonders. Goal number 2, personal growth. Obviously, you can see there they want to increase some of the resources in their school library, such as biographies and so forth, that the teachers can use within their classroom. And then obviously implement more supports for social and emotional learning. And collaboration and partnership. Ms. Kirk and Mr. Clark want to add their own coffees and conversations as well to their school. And certainly they want to focus on school climate, looking at Power School, and obviously incorporating more technology at the school level. Over at RMS, some of the highlights there, Ms. Charette and her staff are really looking at their tiers of intervention, especially for our at-risk students, not just necessarily those that are struggling academically, but also social and emotionally. They want to make sure that they have, child study teams that are addressing all of those needs. They obviously have done a great job with the anti-bullying initiatives, including some of the Sandy Hook Promise initiatives. It starts with Hello that they started last year, and Bully Busters, the Climate Club activities, Do the Right Thing Week, and so forth. And obviously, we started last year in the district through Ms. Thomas and Mr. Jovelos and Ms. Medeiros' leadership, the High Point Counselors, where we have counselors come in from the High Point Counseling Agency. So they're going to continue that program as well. And they do a great job, and I know Mr. Swenson's son participates in this, but the Reebok box program before school, it's, research has shown the more the students are moving, especially before school in the morning, the more attentive and more achievement they'll have during the day. So Rainham Middle School implemented that program, I believe, 2 years ago. And I know, like I said, Mr. Swenson's son participates, and I know is shaking dad early in the morning to get him there. So he's pretty excited to be there. Bridgewater Middle School, Ms. Bastoni and her staff, obviously, again, is looking at student achievement and so important. They're focusing on science, technology, and engineering curriculum as well. They obviously want to look at some of their policies around attendance and tardiness. And then obviously looking at a % of a grade for homework. As you know, some teachers weigh homework more heavily than others. So she's trying to normalize that to get a consistent policy across the school in terms of homework. She would also like to continue the work that started with growth mindset in the district, and then also to introduce PBIS to her staff. One of her school psychologists actually in a former district was the PBIS coach for the district. So Ms. Bastoni is a great resource there, and Ms. Smith, one of her school psychologists. Ms. Bastoni would also like to continue her partnership with Bridgewater State, and then also school climate, again, looking at some of those anti-bullying activities and the great job that the school has started with the National Junior Honor Society. And then Ms. Watson up at the high school, again, looking at the PE curriculum. As you know, obviously, the PE curriculum has been spoken about here before. So looking at some of those standards to make sure that they are aligned and that they are being implemented. And obviously looking to, looking at opportunities across so that the departments aren't working in silos. So we just don't have the ELA department working with the ELA department. We can possibly, have ELA work with science, or math or so forth. School climate, obviously, working on her safety drills. Mr. Swenson and I had the privilege of coming over here with local safety officials to conduct an ALICE drill. I believe it was last week, Mr. Swenson, we were here. So that was great. Obviously, looking at some of the newly established courses, algebra/geometry. And Algebra 2 Part A, and then obviously working with NEASC and making sure that all of those are implemented. One thing that Ms. Watson really wanted me to highlight was under Goal 2, Ms. Watson and her staff have implemented a bridge program, again, working with Mr. Jovelos as well and his staff. It's really a program that's been very successful. It's a bridge program for our students that are struggling to get to school on a daily basis. They might have school phobia. They might have a medical condition. They might be suffering from anxiety or some other type of social emotional disability that's really preventing them from getting to school for a full day. This bridge program is staffed by high school staff, and it allows students to come in as really a bridge or a transition period, getting them back in. Our goal is obviously we want our students back in school full days, but realize some of our students that may have been hospitalized for a medical, can't be in school for a full day. So they can actually go to the bridge program and spend some time in there until they're, really ready to integrate back into the mainstream. But that program has been very, very successful. We were actually able to reassign some staff that already existed within the building, so it wasn't a new cost to the district. Mr. Jovelos really had played a big role in making sure that program has been successful, as well as the other administrators at the high school. So it's been a great program. Ms. Watson has seen some great success from that, and we're excited about continuing that on next year. So those are some of the highlights with the school improvement plans. So I would ask that after you have considered all those points, that you would approve those for the 18-19 school year. And before you do that, Madam Chair, if you remember last year, Mr. Swenson and I talked to you about the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed model for strategic planning and school improvement planning and action planning, referred to as planning for success. And we were toying with the idea of implementing that this past year, but we couldn't necessarily coordinate schedules with a facilitator. Mr. Swenson and I were fortunate enough to go ahead and bring on a facilitator for next year, thankfully at no cost to us. Dr. Whitner from Whitman Hanson is actually, she's a superintendent, she's retiring, and she's a trained facilitator from the state, and she's willing to work with us next year while she's in her retirement. So we will be transitioning from your traditional school improvement plan to the new Planning for Success model, which will really streamline. There won't be nearly as much paper, and the goals and activities will be more aligned across the district.
Very good. All right, do we have a motion to approve the 2018-2019 school improvement plan? Motion by Mr. Dolan, second by Mrs. Scoparis. Mr. Swenson, do you have any comment?
Just first and foremost, the school improvement plans are essential because basically it first starts with our strategic plan, which then trickles down to our district improvement plan, and each individual school improvement plan ties into the mission and vision of the district. Being a former building principal, I know how much work goes into these plans, and we really truly appreciate all the folks that participate in this process. It's not only school employees, it's folks that serve on the school council and representatives from the community as well. So we thank all of them for their due diligence and hard work in getting all these plans aligned so that, again, it does align with our district improvement plan and overall strategic plan. I think the model that we are truly going to next year is going to be a lot more effective and efficient. I'm really excited about moving towards this model. As Mr. Powers stated, we had a meeting, and then we had a follow-up conference call with a facilitator, and I believe we're going to be meeting with her sometime
The end of
in
July.
And get that ball rolling. And I really think that's really going to put a lot of these plans into live practice and action. And that's what it was. We just don't want these plans to sit in a 3-ring binder on a shelf somewhere. We want them to live throughout our district and be put into place in terms of practice so that we improve not only the academic piece to our program, but also the social emotional, which we have talked about considerably this school year. We also talked about our facilities, which will tie into this plan, and it's all about creating safe and welcoming environments for our students to learn each and every day. So thank you, Mr. Powers, for presenting.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you to
Swenson.
all of our building principals and school council members who are really, truly essential in putting these plans together.
All right, thank you. Did anybody in the committee have a question?
Yes,
Mr.
Madam Chair.
Dolan.
If I could, I know you mentioned the parking and over at the Law Liberty, but all of the schools are going to be, for
Yeah.
everybody's knowledge, all of the schools will be going to be looking at that this coming year in the anticipation of the pay to ride ending. So I just want to make sure that.
Yes, we're going to be, this summer is going to be one of our main focuses is going to be looking at traffic flow of all of our sites, working with the towns, working with safety officials, and maybe even looking to bring in some type of consultant who handles these type of situations. One thing, being part of the MSBA process now and going to the selection committee back in May, each architectural firm now has a traffic flow consultant because they realize how essential that piece to it is too. So we now have some connections of folks that actually that is their wheelhouse, that is their business. So we can reach out to those folks and come to the committee for some permission to maybe get into per diem or some type of contract so that they can do a full evaluation of our sites and then come up with some ideas in anticipation of pay to ride no longer being in place as of 1920.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Sure.
The school council surveys that are posted online that the principals email around, that data is then collected and used for a portion of this?
Yes, absolutely. So all that information that the principals and the school improvement councils are gathering throughout the year factor into this. They develop their plans based on that information. And one of the things, and I think this is important to note too, the other reason why we're going to this new model, Planning for Success, is it really is about looking to the future. So whether it's a 3-year to 5-year plan, whatever Mr. Swenson feels is best for our strategic plan, all of the school improvement plans and then the action plans are all based on future goals. What happens right now I know this is really getting away from your question, but it's important. That information that's gathered throughout this school year and sometimes in the past is used to develop a plan for next year. So what happens a lot of times, you're looking during, we'll just use this year as an example, the 17-18 school year, you're using data sometimes from the 2016-2017 school year to write goals for 2018-2019. So you're almost behind from the get-go. But, that's not to say from the parent information, because you're gathering that throughout the year. But we really want it to be more about, not always catching up and trying to plan. We really want it to be about planning ahead and then working towards that. So the parent piece will certainly still be invaluable as part of that process, and all that information will still be gathered. It might be gathered in a different way, but it will certainly still be part of that process.
Anyone else? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Mr. Powers, are you going to stay for the curriculum report?
I'm happy to stay now if you'd like me to, sure. The curriculum report really was talking about the Planning for Success model. I can talk about the handbooks now, Madam Chair, if you'd like to wait and do that later on. The curriculum report really for this month was just talking about the Planning for Success model.
Oh, all right, so why don't we hold off and we'll have you come back?
Absolutely, sounds good, thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our administrative and school committee reports, and first up is the Budget Subcommittee update. Mrs. Skoparis.
Okay, the Budget Subcommittee met on June 11th at 6:30. Dr. Pruwendowski, Mr. Gelfi, Mr. Dolan, and I sit on the Budget Subcommittee. We also had Mrs. Holbrook and Mrs. King in the audience. At the meeting, the Director of Facilities, Paul Fox, provided us with a list of priority repairs that he hopes to complete by September 1st. The repairs will be paid out of the facilities revolving account, and some will be billed to the towns for reimbursement. Repairs to the high school are not billed back to the towns. So the Budget Subcommittee would like to, Paul's going to talk in more detail later on, but I'm just going to make some motions for the full committee. In the form of a motion on behalf of the Budget Subcommittee, I'd like to have a motion to authorize the repair of the first floor sprinkler system at the Bridgewater Raynham Regional High School pending sufficient funds and with the cost not to exceed $25,000.
Motion by Mrs. Skoparis, second by Mrs. Holbrook. Any discussion?
Just to clarify, it's for sprinkler heads that need to be replaced on the first floor, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Or repaired, yeah, no, they bring us 80%. Right, to make it 80%.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted, thank you.
Okay. I'd also like to make a motion to authorize pending sufficient year-end balances that the Director of Facilities to perform necessary maintenance on the Bridgewater Raynham Regional High School rooftop unit at a cost not to exceed $16,500.
Motion by Mrs. Skoparis, second by Mr. Dolan. Any discussion?
And that's for the cooling systems. So, just in case you didn't know what rooftop units were, which I did not.
Maybe it will work a little better. All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? So voted, thank you.
Okay, and a motion to authorize the repair of the auditorium sound system at the Bridgewater Regional High School pending sufficient year-end balances not to exceed $10,000.
Motion by Mrs. Skoparis, second by Mrs. Holbrook. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. So voted, go ahead.
Thank you. And one more, motion to authorize the repair of the stadium sound system at the Bridgewater Regional High School pending sufficient year-end balances not to exceed $10,000.
Motion by Mrs. Skoparis, second by Mr. Dolan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted.
Okay. We also had the Director of Business Services, Kathy Macedo, report to us on the fiscal year 18 budget. It's in good shape. The substitute line has an overall improvement over last year of $62,869. The teachers are doing great. However, there is some concern about the educational support professional substitute line. And then Superintendent Swenson, this is my favorite part, discussed the fiscal year 19 budget, and due to some reassignments and retirements, we may be able to consider hiring a school adjustment counselor and a school psychologist, but this is not definite at this time.
Thank you very much. Is
That's
that your
it.
report?
That's it.
Thank you very much. And we will move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Conley.
Madam Chair, member of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. I want to report out on grants. There's been a lot of questions on them, and I want to try and give you as much information as I can. The last meeting I was at, I talked too fast, so now I'm going to try and not talk as fast. There are 16 grants that I'm going to report on, and they all have different codes, and I'll read you the titles of them. Title II, Part A, and the purpose. The purpose of this grant is to provide supplemental resources to school districts to support systems of support for excellent teaching and leading. An average, and Ms. Macedo provided figures to me from 2013 to 2018, but on average on that grant we got $109,262, and that's from 13 to 18. New one that I found out today, I was talking to Mr. Powers about it, Race to the Top. Massachusetts was one of the 12 winning states in the nation in the national race to the top competition. It was funded by the U.S. Department of Education to promote reform in 4 areas: standards and assessments, great teachers and leaders, school turnaround, and data systems. Half of the RTT funding was allocated for enhanced data systems, model curriculum evaluation, and other state infrastructure to continue to support education reform. The balance of the RTT funding was allocated to over 250 participating school districts and charter schools who had signed on to the challenge of implementing RTT programs. That grant, again, averaged about $23,288. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. Purpose of this grant, Education Entitlement Grant Program, is to provide funds to ensure eligible students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education that includes special education and related services designed to meet their individual needs. On that grant, the average was $1,253,842. Secondary Transition Systematic Improvement Grant. This grant program is to support the development of systemic school districts' best practice in secondary transition to promote positive post-school outcomes for students with IEPs aged 14 to 21. This grant is aligned with results-driven accountability framework focusing on improving educational results and functional outcomes for students with disabilities. And that was 1 year, and we got $2,808 for that. Early Childhood Special Education Entitlement Grant. The purpose of the grant is to provide funds to school districts and charter school districts to ensure the eligible 3-, 4-, and 5-year-old children will receive developmentally appropriate special education and related services designed to meet their individual needs in accordance with the Individual Disability Education Act of 2004 and Massachusetts Special Education Laws and Regulations. That we averaged $48,734. Special Education Program Improvement Grant. Purpose of the grant is to promote professional development activities aligned with the Massachusetts Standards for Professional Development, which will advance the knowledge, skills, and capacity of educators to meet the diverse needs of students with individual education plans ages 3 through 21 in order to support improved educational results and functional outcomes for the students. And that grant we received averaged $35,926. Hopefully I'm not boring people.
No, we like good.
There you go. All right, good, thank you. Essential School Health Services. The purpose of this grant program is to create and/or expand the essential school health service structure and standards under the oversight of the MDPH School Health Unit. The program is designed to begin and/or continue to establish the infrastructure to provide all school-age children access to a school health service program. That grant averaged about $108,287. Early Childhood Special Education Discretionary Program Federal Improvement Grant. The purpose of this grant is to support preschool district activities to ensure that eligible children with disabilities aged 3 to 5 receive a free and appropriate public education that includes special education and related services designed to meet their individual needs and this is provided in natural, least restrictive environments. The grant is intended to further district-level early childhood special education practices that align with priorities identified by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Department of Early Education and Care. This one averaged about $4,355. Title I, Part A. Purpose of this grant is to provide supplemental resources to local school districts to help provide all children significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education, and to close educational achievement gaps. With this grant, we received $492,606 on average. And we had a carryover. There's Title I that they call carryover, and we carried over an average of about $25,474. Summer Academic Support Grant. This was discontinued, but we received for 2-year average about $10,000. Literacy Partnership, that was discontinued also, but 13 through, I'm sorry, it ended in 18, but we got 17,302. Let's see. Title III, this grant provides supplemental funds to improve the education of English learners, including immigrant children and youth, by assisting the children and youth to learn English and meet challenging state academic content and student academic achievement standards. And we've received $7,727 for that. The last one, Title IV, I'm sorry. The purpose of this grant is to provide supplemental resources to local school districts to build capacity, to help ensure that all students have equitable access to high-quality education experience. And in FY18, we were awarded $13,675. For the year, for 2018, total amount that we received for all the grants was $2,192,243. One of the other things I want to let people know is, and again, some things I found out tonight, a lot of these grants are competitive, so districts have to compete and put in. And the people that have to look at these grants, Mr. Swenson, Mr. Powers, Ms. Thomas, Ms. Latendry, they have to look at everything, get all the information in. And then what I do as the treasurer is make a report every month, how much we've spent, how much we expect to spend, and borrow that money, get that money from the grant to pay back into the system and stuff, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those.
Mr. Swenson, any comments?
Just, sometimes I feel like the communities may not realize how much grants supplement our operational budget. It's a big chunk. We use a majority of our monies that we have come in to offset salaries from the operational budget. We have some special ed grants that pay for paraprofessionals. We have the Title I grant that pay for some of our Title I teachers and staff. We, as the former assistant superintendent, now Mr. Powers doing this with Title II, writing Title II, we utilize that for professional development, our lead teachers, mentors. So all those things that would have to be incorporated within the operational budget end up being supplemented by these grants. I will say that having written grants in the past and seeing the folks writing grants now, it's a daunting task. As Mr. Conley said, a majority of them are competitive grants. So the narratives that you create to show evidence that your district is in need of this money is pretty intense. It's a pretty daunting task. You got to make sure that all your I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and that you have evidence to provide the state or the federal government that they're going to be utilized appropriately. We do get audited on our grants as well, so we have to make sure that if we're writing a grant for, say, Title I, we're not using it for special ed, or if we're writing a special ed grant, we're not using it for Title I, or supplementing things that we shouldn't be using in regards to the narrative that you've created for that particular grant. But without those grants, obviously, it would be another $2 million we would need a year to make sure that our district is running efficiently and effectively. So I just want to say thank you to all the folks who are writing grants throughout our district, Mr. Powers, Mrs. Thomas, and the folks, Ms. Medeiros and Mr. Jovelos from the Special Education Department, Mrs. Latenda, who writes our Title I. And
I just wanted to mention too that it's very important that when we have these grants that we don't, that we use it to supplement.
Not
the
supplant.
district, not supplant.
Correct.
Which means we can't be using it for things that should be in our budget.
Good. So, yep.
Mention that.
Supplement versus supplant. That's an important piece to that. So, again, there's a lot of work, and the majority of the grant writing happens throughout the summer, so that we're able to provide that information to the folks that are providing the grant, hopefully prior to the start of the school year, so we can utilize those funds to obviously provide intervention for our students or provide services throughout the district. So again, thank you to all those folks, and thank you, Mr. Conley, for looking into all those grants, hearing it out loud. Sometimes you don't realize how many we do have.
Right.
But hearing it out loud tonight was
And-
impressive.
Just one other thing, and it's on the agenda tonight, is like a BSU grant. And it may seem like a small amount, but we get a lot of grants from BSU, and I know Mr. Powers worked with it, and a lot of the teachers and staff, you don't have to apply for it, they just, and I think that's important too. So I don't know the exact figure on that we've gotten from BSU, but I think it's very important.
Quite a bit from BSU. We have a great partnership with the university.
Did anyone have a question? Mr. Gelfi?
Yeah, just in the future, is there any way you can make a copy?
I have copies
There's a-
here.
within- there's a
Yes,
long
yeah,
list.
I apologize for that. I have them, I should have handed them out, my apologies. I have them, I'll make sure that you get them, so.
All right, thanks.
All right, sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conley. That was very informative.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
Next up, we have the Rainham Middle School Hall of Fame report. Mrs. King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to report to the school committee on May 1st. I was appointed as the school committee representative to the Rainham Middle School Hall of Fame Committee. Each year, the Hall of Fame Committee accepts nominees of members of the Rainham Middle School community, people that have gone above and beyond. Anyone that in their school that has served more than 10 years in some sort of a teaching position, a volunteer position, someone supporting their community, and they recognize them. On Monday, May 21st, I met with Judy Roberts and Miranda O'Connor, faculty at the RMS, and their RMS committee members, and we discussed and approved this year's potential candidates. On Monday, June 5th, in the Rainham Middle School Library, the RMS Hall of Fame Committee hosted a ceremony to uncover this year's three Hall of Fame award recipients. The first was Eva Aruda, a former head cook. This was accepted posthumously by her family, which they have never done before, but she was very much loyal to the RMS community and served them for a very long time. Lynn Pinsagali, which is a retired science teacher, again, very much loved science teacher. A lot of her team came to the ceremony to support her and to thank her. And Leslie Damish, which is a longtime parent volunteer. Her youngest is now moving on to live at the high school. But she has served in a volunteer capacity for a very long time at the RMS. It was a great ceremony honoring the dedication and the positive impact that these three women have had on the RMS community. And each, we had a head cook, a retired teacher, a parent volunteer, and each in their own way, they contributed to the community. So it was a great ceremony.
Thank you for attending that. Very nice report. All right, next we have a personnel update. Mrs. Gormley.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. I'd like to announce the following new appointments and reassignments that the superintendent has approved. Timothy Califf, new assistant principal at Bridgewater Middle School, effective July 1. Jennifer Kelly, special education teacher for sub-separate program at the Mitchell Elementary School. Kathleen Lynch, reassignment as special education teacher in a sub-separate program at Mitchell, and both of those are effective in the 2018-19 school year. And Lynn Burns, full-year secretary at the Merrill Elementary School, effective July 1. In addition, a retirement reception was held at the Bridgewater Rainham Regional High School Library on Monday, June 11th, and the following retirees were recognized. At the Lily B. Merrill Elementary School, Jean Allen, grade 1 teacher after 25 years of service. Mary Jean Chaka, kindergarten special education teacher after 24 years of service. At the high school, John E. Carney, physical education teacher after what will be 30 years of service. Dennis Rodriguez, physical education teacher after 24 years of service. At the Mitchell Elementary School, Paula Moriarty, special education teacher after 24 years of service. And at the Rainham Middle School, Gail Nunes, school nurse after 16 years of service. And Kathleen Thompson, grade 5 teacher after 30 years of service. So I just wanted to note that these 7 retirees had a collective total of 133 years of service to the students of Bridgewater and Rainham. We thank them for their service. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Gormley.
Ms. Gormley?
Moving on to our Facilities Department report, Mr. Fox.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. I'm here today to highlight a few other activities that I'm hoping to get accomplished this summer, other than those that were mentioned already. The first of which is at the Williams Intermediate School. The phone system over there is antiquated and is very difficult to operate right now. We're dumping some money into it to try to take a Band-Aid approach to it, and ultimately it's leading to the conclusion that we just need to go forth and replace the whole thing. I'm seeking ultimately $22,500, and I'll go back to the towns and seek reimbursement from them for that. The second project that I'd like to highlight is at the Liberty and Merrill schools. There are a series of sprinkler heads over there between the two buildings, approximately 20, that I would like to get replaced. Ultimately, this is a cost-effective approach, doing a batch replacement of them compared to just one at a time. Again, I will go back to the towns and seek the reimbursement for that project as well. I'm thinking it'll be right around $10,000. Third project that I'm looking into is the Rainham Middle School auditorium sound system, much like the sound system in this auditorium, and same with the stadium auditorium here at the high school, the 3 of which I'm looking to replace this summer. Just over the years, communications have failed and then reconfigurations have failed, and they deserve the attention to ultimately bring them up to correct operational standards. I'm thinking that Rainham Middle School, again, will be in the approximate amount of about $10,000. Again, I will go back to the town and seek hopeful reimbursement from them. Finally, I'd just like to highlight that this summer we'll also be looking into some safety and security upgrades potentially. I know that we have a safety and security meeting this Friday, of which I think we're going to be talking about how we can improve building and classroom performance, and possibly installing some hardware if it's all agreed upon for a solution. More will follow, and I'm sure I'll be in touch with Mr. Marrera about that. That concludes my presentation.
Did anyone have any questions for Mr. Fox? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
All right, so we have no unfinished business, and we will move on to new business. A vote to approve the 2018-2019 bus routes. Ms. Macedo.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school committee members, Superintendent Swenson. I believe you have in front of you copies of the bus routes for your review and approval. I just wanted to mention that both Ellen George and Gail Howard from Lucini Bus Company, along with Meg Cohen, have been working very hard to make sure that the FY19 transportation program gets off to a smooth start. These routes are very similar to the current year routes. We only have a few that maybe we had to make a few adjustments to, some small tweaks. The drivers have reviewed and run their routes. And once approved this evening, we anticipate distributing the individual bus information to parents by the end of the week, either via the Power School email system. And for our kindergarten parents, we will be sending it out through email as well as postal mail to ensure that new families receive the information. So I would look to hear if we can get an approval on these so that we can move forward with getting that information out for parents.
All right, so a motion to approve the 2018-2019 bus routes. Motion by Ms. Holbrook, second by Mr. Marrera. Any discussion? Any?
So a quick question about the drivers, if I could, Madam Chair. The drivers drove these routes. Are the drivers, have they bid on their routes already?
I believe they have. I haven't heard, but they've been driving these routes though, so.
Okay, perfect.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Swenson, did you have any comment?
Just in terms of, just thank you to Mrs. George and Gail Howard from Lucini Bus Lines. As Mrs. Macedo stated, Lucini's worked very closely with central administration staff. The bus drivers have ran the routes themselves. They've provided feedback. We've passed it by some safety officials as well. So all the tweaks that we feel needed to be made in regards to safety of our students have been made. The goal, again, is to, on Friday afternoon, I believe after 5 o'clock, all of the current Bridgewater Rainham Regional School District bus students, families, will receive that information via email. And our kindergarten folks will get an email, and some that maybe at even a later date might get the snail mail hard copy as well. And Mrs. George, I know I've been kind of a little panicked about this week, but she and I have had a few dozen conversations about it. We just want to make sure everything gets out to our parents on Friday. So, and I can't say enough of the work that Mrs. George has done this year in terms of our transportation. You've been a godsend, so thank you.
So motion to approve the bus routes. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Thank you very much
Thank you.
to everyone
Thank
that
you,
worked on that.
everyone.
Thank you.
Next, we have the vote to approve the 2018 extended school year summer programming. Ms. Medeiros.
Good evening, Superintendent Swenson, school committee members. Our extended school year program, we as a district have taken over providing those services for our students since 2012, consistently and pretty successfully. And this year, our program will run for 5 weeks. There is one severe needs classroom that does run an additional week. The dates are July 10th through to August 10th, with that one classroom running the additional week through August 17th. We do offer a wide variety of programming. I don't know how much detail you would like, but we do offer summer programming for our students from preschool all the way through age 22. The extended school year program is designated for our special needs students who require services during the summer. So it's not offered necessarily for all our special needs students, but those students that the team determines that they need some services over the summer because the break is just too long without having the supports in order to maintain their skills or to make sure that they don't regress significantly over the summer. So there is a wide variety of programming. 3 of the classrooms will be held at the high school for our older students, and that programming will run no earlier than 8:30 in the morning and will be dismissed no later than 12:30, and that's for the 5 weeks, also the July 10th to August 10th. The remaining program, which services generally preschool through grade 8, will be housed at the Rainham Middle School in different classrooms, and I take time with Charlene Charette to coordinate which classrooms will be utilized, so we try to be the least invasive to the projects that Mr. Fox has planned and the cleaning and different things like that. So we can work collaboratively to make sure we're providing students with what they need and trying not to interfere as much as we can with all the cleaning that takes place in the summer. I just want to extend a big gratitude to Charlene Charette for hosting it again this year. She's been very helpful, especially in, making room and helping with those assignments. And also a big thank you to Angela Watson. She's consistently hosted some of our programming up at the high school, and that becomes a real nice natural space for the older kids to be in. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. Is it, I know it's 5 weeks and 6 weeks, but is it Monday through Thursday, like in the past? How many days?
It will be, thanks for asking, it's Thursday through Friday. It's 4 days a week, but that depends on the programming. So there is no programming on Mondays, but it will be Tuesday through Friday, but it also depends on the program. Depending on the child's severity of needs, depends on the amount of time they spend in the summer program. So our most severe program would be 4 days, 4 hours a day. And then we also have programs that might just be that a child needs some additional support and strategies and reminders for reading strategies or math strategies. So they might just come once or twice a week for academic support in the area of math or reading and ELA.
I had a quick question. I'm imagining that this is all covered as part of a district cost and that we provide transportation and...
It is, and we provide transportation for students who qualify for the transportation. So if a child qualifies for transportation based on their disability during the course of the school year, they also qualify for summer extended school year services. The only exception would be if a parent expresses a significant hardship. For example, you have a child who is in daycare and the parent cannot get their child there to access those services, then we look into that and would provide it accordingly.
Any other questions for Mrs. Medeiros?
Just to clarify, there has to be language within the individual education plan that states that they qualify for
It
this
is a
service.
team decision.
I just want to
So-
clarify, just because a lot of parents may feel like this is an opportunity or an option for them for some type of
It is the
summer
difference
programming.
between benefit and need. So a lot of children do benefit, and we will sit at meetings, and parents would want summer services because they would all benefit. And to be quite honest, our typically developing students who are not identified as special needs students benefit from doing something over the summer. That's why we provide those summer packets with math and reading and recommend strongly that they read and do all those things because every child benefits from that. But the purpose of extended school year is because the children will require it. And when we talk about regression, we usually describe it in terms of, we all get a little sand in the brain, as I like to call it, when we're off for the summer. And then September comes and it's like, oh, geez, I know I learned those times tables. What were they again? But most children can recoup that rather quickly with some reminders and reinforcement. So within the first 2 to 3 weeks of school, they're back to where they were maybe in June. We're talking about students that without these services, it would take them till probably Thanksgiving to be back to where they were in June. And we just don't want that to happen. We want them to maintain as much as what they've worked hard to learn.
All right, motion to approve the 2018 extended school year summer programming. Motion by Mr. Gelfi, second by Mrs. King. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Medeiros.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, vote to approve the changes to the 2018-2019 student handbook, K through 8. Mr. Powers.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. Mr. Bresnahan and I will be presenting to you tonight the student handbooks for approval for the 2018-2019 school year. I will review the minor changes, really no changes, but just additions to the K-8 handbook, and Mr. Bresnahan will go over the high school handbook. As you know, the school committee approves these handbooks on a yearly basis. You approved a not newly created, but a newly aligned handbook last year, where we had one elementary and one intermediate middle school handbook, regardless of the side of the district you were on. As you know, prior to that, we had each individual school have their own handbook, and we just found some inconsistencies. So we really tried to go to more of a district handbook and make it more level specific, with some flexibility in that, principals can insert, welcome back letter or some information that's specific just to their school, but for the contents are consistent and the same. There are a few additions that I'm proposing tonight, and in no particular order, just to review these with you. There's some information there on ALICE. As you know, we've adopted ALICE as our emergency response procedure, but we did not have that information in the handbook. So you have a one-page ALICE summary language that I would like to include in the handbooks, and that'll go in Part 4, Student Services, where we talk about our emergency drills. There is religious holiday guidance. As you know, in the past, we have on the school calendar and in the handbooks made reference to particularly the Jewish holidays. And some conversation last year with some different constituents, students, staff, families, the question came up, why just the Jewish holidays? What about if I celebrate this holiday or this I practice this religion? And so Mr. Swenson and I really had some long dialogue, and we met with our administrative staff and our lead teachers and department heads and really devised some religious holiday guidance. Most of this is actually based on language right from the state in terms of the law. So it's got some legal backing to it. It doesn't really necessarily change our practice, but it just puts a little bit more language to it. And so we'd like to include that. Basically, we, as you know, this year we've eliminated any mention of the Jewish holidays on the school calendar. And what really we'd like to put this in there, and this encompasses all religions. And basically, what it's saying is that the responsibility falls on the parents to notify the school if a child will be absent or is unable to complete work in the evening due to a religious observation. All they simply have to do is send a note in. That child will be excused for that evening or for that day from school or from their work, and then they'll be granted a period of time to make that work up, which is pretty consistent with what our policy is now. But again, it's not just specific to the Jewish holidays. So that'll also be included in there. And again, we already have language in there about religious observations, but you can see it's a little bit meatier. So that'll go in Part 2 under attendance. The concussion policy, again, this is a policy that's already existed. We just realized that at the elementary and middle school level, it was not part of that handbook, so we wanted to include that. Again, that policy is already in place. We just wanted to include the policy in the handbook. So that'll go under Part 4, Student Services as well. And Ms. Fahey has come before you at various times to talk about the physical restrictions during the academic day protocol. And so again, we would also like to incorporate that into the student handbook. We obviously have that protocol, but we realized that because it was newly developed during this year that it was not part of the handbook, so we want to include that for next year. And there's additional language, and I apologize, this is actually my error, it's a late addition. We've been working with one of our attorneys about some language in our handbooks regarding another situation, and she suggested incorporating some cultural diversity language. I'm not sure, I gave that to Ms. McDougall very late today, so it may not have actually got into your packet. And if it didn't, I can obviously share it with you later. But basically, it's just a statement from our lawyer talking about cultural diversity. I'm happy to table that right now if you don't have that in front of you, and we can always add it after the fact, after the July meeting, I guess, would be. Or I can go ahead and read it to you now if you'd like to approve it. It's up to you.
Is it relatively brief?
I can read fast.
Very good. Go for it.
Diversity brings depth and richness to the educational environment of the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District. Research indicates that students gain substantial academic, social, and other educational benefits when provided the diverse educators and role models. The Bridgewater-Rainham School District is committed to sustaining a workplace and learning environment that is welcoming, accepting, and free of discrimination for all, regardless of race, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, disabilities, genetic information, gender identity, or age. In order to effectively serve all students, Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District strives to understand the issues that make more challenging for some. To this end, Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District wants to understand how to make school more safe and welcoming for all, regardless of their differences, must actively work to remove barriers to student learning, needs to understand how to work more effectively with diverse groups of parents so they can support their children's success at school, must ensure that all students have access to quality educational programs and that equity exists between program offerings at schools across BR. It is also the policy of the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School District that the curriculum content and instructional materials utilized reflect the cultural and racial diversity present in the United States and variety of careers, lifestyles, and roles open to our students. One of the objectives of curriculum and teaching strategies is to reduce stereotyping and eliminate bias on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, disability, genetic information, gender identity, or age. Very similar to some of the language we already have, but she also wanted to include the language about the cultural diversity piece. So that would go under general information in the handbooks at all levels.
So let's put the motion on the floor. Motion to vote to approve changes to the 2018-19 Student Handbook K through 8. Motion by Mr. Gelfi, second by Mr. Dolan. Mr. Swenson.
Just, again, the aligning these last year was really important to make sure that we have consistency across the district. And the changes that are being added to this, obviously, as we evolve as a society, our schools have to reflect that as well. And the language that Mr. Powers just read to you in terms of the cultural piece, I think is very important information that we should be including in our handbooks. Again, thank you to Mr. Powers, all of the assistant principals for all their hard work. It's important that throughout the course of the school year, when situations occur, that our assistant principals and principals make note of that, and then come back to the committee, the handbook committees, and make those changes so that we can improve upon the quality of services that we're providing our students each and every day. So it is a very important work group to get this information together and put it into these documents so that the following year, we don't start to run into some of the same issues that we encountered the year prior. So thank you to Mr. Powers. And
Thank you, Mr. Swenson.
Wonderful assistant principals that work with Mr. Powers in making these changes.
And Madam Chair, if I may, just 2 quick points. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Mr. Bresnahan, Mr. Clark, and Mr. Martis. They really have taken the point for each of their levels in developing and making any edits and changes to the handbook. So I can't thank them enough for their efforts. And also just one thing Ms. McDougall and I will work on this summer once we go ahead and make some of these additions. If you work with Google and Word, you know when you go from Word to Google, we do run into some formatting issues. And as we started to go through these, we realized that some of the changes or some of the additions we wanted to make, where's the page number? So there were some formatting issues, so we are going to go back and forth and sit down this summer and make sure that it's as user-friendly as possible.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any questions for Mr.
Excuse me, Madam
King?
Chair?
Oh, let's have Rachel go first.
I just had a question, Madam Chair, about the health services one regarding the restrictions during the pandemic day. One of the points it says any student that has extremities, etc., will not be able to participate in physical education or recess. Do you have an alternative to that, or what is the plan for that?
Madam Chair, if I may, could we table that, this protocol, the district protocol for physical restriction during the academic day, and send that to the policy committee?
Is that your recommendation, Mrs.
We
Swenson?
can do that.
Okay.
So just that particular piece
Just
of
that
the
particular
handbook.
piece, please.
So, any other questions or concerns?
Would you like me to, I can answer that question, Ms. King, or we're not going to talk about that at all, or?
Why don't you-
Table until we discuss it in
Okay.
policy vote?
So that was a motion, so I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion to table the district protocol for physical restrictions during academic day and forward that to the policy subcommittee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So voted. Okay. So any questions on the remaining changes to the handbook?
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Just for the record, that was also my comment also. But I was obviously.
Oh, you'll be a little faster, or you're going to get my attention. All right. So how about a vote to, we did a motion and second for the others. Okay. All those in favor of the other changes to the handbook? Okay.
that we're not
Madam Chair,
including the
I'll
protocol.
amend the original motion to only include adding Alice, religious holiday guidance, concussion policy, and cultural diversity statement to all the student handbooks.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Marrera, all those in favor of the amendment? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Are we good? Okay. Yep. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
And now we have a vote to approve the changes to the 2018-19 student handbook at the high school. Mr. Bresnahan.
Good evening, Madam Chair, School Committee, Superintendent Swenson. I'm going to be proposing the changes to the high school handbook for the 2018-19. I've given everybody a packet. I'm going to go through each item, and some of the language is going to reference a page. The page number is the previous handbook, 2017-18, and most of the changes are in bold. The high school has included a daily advisory period from 7:26, 7:33, which the old one was on page 15, and what we are now proposing is that we have an advisory period every day, and the reason for that is NEASC has specific guidelines for advisory, how often we meet, and we also have been including some social emotional activities in our advisory, so our administrative team feels that we could infuse a little bit more into that if we have a consistent advisory period during the day. Number two, right now, presently, students have 5 school days after returning to school to make up work, which is determined by school administration. Extensions may be granted by administration. It used to say 1 to 7 days, and the administrative team felt that it was more consistent to have a set number of 5 days versus the 1 to 7. So we included, to be consistent, 5 days. Number 3, absences verified by a medical note must be submitted within 3 days after students return to school. We thought that that was maybe a little too stringent, so, it used to say must be submitted upon arrival, so now we've extended to 3 days. We didn't think that upon arrival had enough flexibility in it, so now we give 3 days, and honestly, we even sometimes give a little more leeway than that, depending on the circumstances. Number 4, under unexcused absences, we added students might not be permitted to make up work, and to explain that, there's certain requirements for an absence to be excused, and some unexcused absences constitute skipping class, so obviously there is penalties for that. We don't allow the students cutting class for them to make up work, but some absences also can be that a parent forgets to bring in a note, so that we want to have flexibility with certain circumstances to let them make up their work. And right now it says no, so they might be able to make it up. Unexcused absences on number 5 are considered disciplinary events. One unexcused absence from any class may result in 1 Saturday detention. We changed will result to may result in a Saturday detention. We changed a lot of our language in the handbook from will to may, because we find that when you put will, it locks you into certain circumstances, certain situations for consequences. And we want to make sure that there's some situations where it definitely has to be will. Things, for example, assault on a staff member, certain drug offenses, things like that. We want to have very specific language where it is a will lead to certain days. But for the most part, we want to have flexibility in our handbook where it says may. So the administration has some flexibility with dealing with situations. Number 6. Number 2 on page 18, under unexcused absences, we added 2 unexcused absences per term for skipping class. We changed the word to make sure it was skipping. Before, the language was a little bit ambiguous. We want to make sure that we clarified that for the teachers, that it's actually skipping class results in this type of consequence. Number 7, we added under number 5, unexcused absence. Vacations other than those built into the school calendar are considered unexcused on page 18. We have to clarify that, and we understand that we have certain specific vacations built into the calendar, and sometimes parents, for whatever reason, have to take them, or they take them out on other vacations on other days besides that. We understand it, but we want to try to limit that because, as far as the absences, because that affects instruction, affects their ability to do their work. So they are unexcused, but we do allow them to make up the work if it's extenuating circumstances on that, but not generally we don't. Number 7, we added under number 5, unexcused absence, vacations other than those built in. Again, that's 18. On number 8, presently on page 18, we added the new religious holiday guidance language from the district. Number 9, we added new language from the already approved course selection booklet on page 20. and that's already been approved by the school committee. Number 10, final examinations. We added students with suspensions of 2 days or more will not be eligible to exempt any finals. So if a student's been suspended, whether it's inside or out, they cannot exempt finals, whether they meet the criteria by the grades or not. Number 11, we added vacations or not excused absences. Again, we put this in also where the makeup exams are for finals and midterms, because we've had some conversations with parents where there's been some confusion. If it's a vacation during that time, they are not excused. Again, we'll look at each circumstance and decide if, in fact, there's extenuating circumstances or not. Number 12, we changed from Edline to Power School. That's a minor change, but we use Power School. 13, on our current page 31, we have the district concussion policy as well as the district protocol for physical restrictions during academic day to our handbook. Number 14, on our current page 31, we added our new ALICE training protocols, which will be on the same page as fire drills. Number 15, we added a new link to search. Number 15 came from our athletic department, and a lot of this, the language that's going to be coming up really comes from the MIA, and so we're tied to the language that's in the MIA. So number 15 and 16, the language that's in black, they've made some changes to include vape pens as tobacco products because a lot of schools are having issues with that. Number 17 is also MIA language for minimum penalties. Number 18, on page 50, under automobile parking permits, we added in bold for number 5, vehicles shall not be used before or during the school day for the purpose of congregating or loitering. To explain that, we have students that are in their vehicles before school for an extensive period of time, and unfortunately, we do have some students that do some unsavory things before school that lead to us, when we have searches, that we end up finding some things. So we're trying to avoid students being in their vehicles too long before school or after school or during school, which is why the language is there. Number 19, we created new procedures for electronic devices in school, which is currently on page 52. This is language that we'll be sharing with our staff. Just going to quickly go through this. We already know it's a district policy where students cannot have their phones out, and they have to be, so for our procedures in our building, the students must use their phones in class with teacher permission only for academic reasons. Otherwise, the phones have to be out of sight. They can either be put in boxes, they can be put in holders, or the students can hold on to them, but they can't be out. If the teacher chooses for them to use those devices for only academic reasons, then that's fine. If they choose to violate that, the first infraction, which we were putting there, we didn't have these listed before, and we're trying to have some continuity with this because a lot of times it comes to interpretation, and I know people try to do a great job, but it can sometimes cause some confusion. So the first offense, the teacher will confiscate the device, or they'll contact us if they don't feel comfortable taking that. We'll come up, remove the student, get the device, and then the parents will be contacted. They'll pick it up, okay? Kids are going to make mistakes with these. We don't want to hit them over the head the first time they make a mistake, so it's a light consequence. It acts more of a warning, and the parents to reinforce our expectations for that. Number 2, second electronic device infraction, students sent to the main office to see an administrator. The device is confiscated. Parent guardian must pick it up from school, and then the student will be assigned a low-level consequence, which is a detention. On the third time, students sent to the main office, same thing. To see administrator, electronic device is confiscated. Parent guardian must pick it up. Student will be assigned a Saturday detention. So it's progressive discipline, goes from parent contact to a detention, low level, to a Saturday detention. And on the fourth time, if that happens, we're hoping it doesn't. From my experience, usually they get it after the second time, or when the parents call them or get a hold of them, it usually is corrected pretty quick. But for some situations, it's not. So on the fourth time, the administrative team felt it was appropriate that they would no longer be able to have that device in school, or if it's a safety issue, they could drop it off in the morning to an administrator. We use that with great success. You know, we do have a couple students that sometimes push the limit, and the first 2, 3 don't work. That last option usually works very well, where we have it in the morning, or the parents just keep it at home. And then it's not a disturbance. Cell phones can be a great asset in schools. They really can, if they're used for academic reasons, but they can also be a real disturbance to a class. So we want to make sure that we were consistent with these. Any refusal to turn over the electronic device to a school administrator may lead to a suspension for insubordination, and that's added. And again, we don't usually have that issue, but we want that language to be there. Social probation, this is when students go over a allotted number of unexcused tardies. So if they go over 21 unexcused tardies, we added, if a student has excessive attendance, behavioral, or academic issues during the school year, he or she may no longer be eligible to attend, participate in school-sponsored events, prom, dances, senior week activities, athletics, etc. This is at the discretion of school administration. Right now, social probation is really only aligned with unexcused tardies. The state really wants, from my experience, really wants school administration to use privileges or take privileges away as a deterrent versus using suspensions as much as we do. So privileges, there is no law governing privileges. They are exactly that, a privilege. So if we find that there's excessive behavior, attendance, academic issues, then we want to start working more towards using those on that. Public displays of affection, we added students who violate this rule will be disciplined accordingly. And there's a reason for that. There are different levels of PDA that happens in school. There's low levels and there's high levels. And being that this is a large school, this is a very large school, and students sometimes are in areas they shouldn't be, and if they're not being supervised, there could be some accusations that could come forward, and we want to prevent those things from happening. So we want to have a range of, a low level for this is excessive. Student IDs, this is something we're adding this year. Each student will be carrying an ID. We're looking at having lanyards for them, but I believe we're going to have some flexibility whether they carry it around their neck or if they carry it on the waist, but they're going to be expected to have that. So they're going to have to display that. That's going to be brand new. 23 assaults, we need to clean up the language on this because really before it just kind of really talked about assault on staff, which is it's not a may, it's an automatic, a minimum of 8 days, suspension with possible expulsion. Anything towards a staff member, that's actually a violation of 37H. And then any student who verbally or physically assaults another student on school premises or during school-sponsored events may be suspended. The previous language did not distinguish between a staff member and a student, so we want to clean that up a little bit. 24, fighting on school property, same thing. We wanted this to align with assault. Assault is usually a verbal thing, it could be a threat, but it's versus having a minimum of 8 days or that, we wanted to just say suspension. And through a lot of dialogue with different administrators, we felt that was more appropriate so it doesn't lock us into things. 25, under no smoking and smokeless tobacco, we change our language to make vaping, etc., drug paraphernalia. There's a lot of schools in the state that are moving that way. Some have already moved that way where they're labeling that. Unfortunately, vapes can be altered to have a lot of various drugs in them. And there's different types of vapes and hookahs and such. And I don't know what people's education on that, but there are schools that are finding synthetics in it and fentanyl and GHB and everything else. So we want to make sure that the penalty is still the same. We're not trying to just be punitive. We want to try to educate them as well. But we want to label it as drug paraphernalia. And I said I sent out a survey out to the state this year, and a majority of my colleagues in the state are moving towards drug paraphernalia and such because of that. Number 26, we'll be adding class rank to determine the top 3 students in the senior class will be calculated after third term grades. And those are proposed changes for next year's handbook, and we hope that you accept those.
All right. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Bresnahan?
Yeah.
Mrs. Paris.
You mentioned the Edline Power School, I don't remember what number it was. Would it make more sense to use like a generic versus a brand name? Because if we were to change it again, we would have to change it each time. Is there any way to make it not brand specific to Power School, or it's just want to keep an eye on it?
I think you could do it any way you would like. I think it's just been past practice to just label what we've been using because the parents go on there and they go online for the portal. But I don't really see an issue with that.
We can leave it as long as we're aware that we have to keep an eye on it if we do change. I guess. And then on number 26, the class rank, did we change when it's calculated or the calculation itself? You said you're adding how they're determining the top 3 students. Was it always class rank or was?
So with 26, from my understanding with this is that we just want to clarify when it's calculated. because there was some dispute now. Was it after the third term? Was it after the fourth term? When is it? So we want to put language in that it's calculated after the third. Exactly, the timing of it, exactly, yeah.
I just had a more of a clerical issue. Are you going to have the back page be the signature one? Because if you rip it off and pass it in, you take away the phone numbers.
Great question. We actually don't give these hard copies to the students. So those, we have a certain number of those. They actually get a online signature, so they can do it that way. We give these out to, some students request that they want a hard copy, so we make extras just in case.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, under number 20, social probation, I don't see graduation in there. Is that a right versus a privilege?
Okay, so that's a great question. So graduation is a privilege. We just don't include that in social probation. That'd be a separate thing that's determined by the building principal on that.
Thank
Mr. Swenson, any comments?
I know that Mr. Dolan just had a quick question in regards to,
Just a question, my follow-up question on number 25, because I know we have as a school committee policy regarding drug-free and alcohol, drug possession and use by students. I just wanted to make sure that this language on 25 is consistent with our language as a school committee policy.
In the past, we treated e-cigarettes more as a cigarette-type issue.
Yes.
Now you'd like to up it to the drug paraphernalia.
Yes, yeah, that's our request. And there are districts that still do treat it that way. They're just kind of moving away because there are so many things they can put in them now.
So before we change our policy, we do change the policy first before we can accept that?
can you table that piece to it?
So, Madam Chair, in the form of a motion, I'd like to table number 25 and the addition of, the addition of the district protocol for physical restrictions during academic day, as we did with the others.
Okay. Any second to that motion?
Second.
Mrs. Scoparis, all those in favor of tabling number 25? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. When does, so voted. When does this need to have to be officially approved before it can go out to, well, we don't print, so it's,
Well, we do send these off to the, we do send these out to the printer. Last year, I did it in August, early August, so.
all right, very good. Motion to approve the changes to the high school handbook for 2018-19 with the exception of the number 25.
And
Number
the
25 and the.
And the,
Yes.
correct, okay. Motion by Mrs. Holbrook, second by Mr. Dolan, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. And now, we are moving on to, something easy. Approval of the payroll warrants dated May 24th, 2018, and June 7, 2018. Motion by Mr. Gelfi, second by Mrs. Scoparis. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Approval of the general ledger warrants dated May 24th, 2018, and June 7th, 2018. Motion by Mrs. Scoparis, second by Mr. Marrera. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. And we have the acceptance of gifts and grants. Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As always, I'll read all of our grants and gifts and then ask for a vote of consensus from the committee. The first one we have is from National Grid as a matching gift program that the employees of National Grid participate in. 3 of their employees chose to gift money to the Bridgewater Rainham Regional School District. Mr. David Tufts donated $500, Mrs. Nora Plowman donated $50, and Mr. Paul Hanley donated $300 for a grand total of $850. So thank you to all of those wonderful employees at National Grid for helping our district. We have a Bridgewater State University Community Partnership Grant awarded in the amount of $4,200 to the pre-K program for exploring music classes. And finally, we have a gentleman by the name of Mr. Brian Alves. He wanted to donate money he received from a GoFundMe page online dedicated to help pay off school lunch debts of our students. He has now donated $170 in total. Mr. Delisle, who is our Director of Food Services through Chartwells, will deposit this amount and pay off the accounts for the students who attend the Mitchell Elementary School in Bridgewater. So,
Very nice.
yeah,
Thank
very
you
nice.
very much. Oh, motion to
motion.
approve the gifts and grants. Motion by Mr. Marrero, second by Mrs. Scoparis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted.
Thank you so
very
much. Appreciate that.
And now we come to the part of the agenda with public comment. Anyone have any public comments? All righty, and we're going to move on just to our announcements. I'd like to announce that the Rainham Middle School will have their move-up ceremony on June 19th at 5 o'clock. The Bridgewater Middle School will have their move-up ceremony on June 19th at 6 o'clock. And we'd like the school committee to RSVP to Mrs. McDougal, if you could. The last day of school for 2017-2018 is June 20th, 2018, which will be a half a day. And does anyone on the school committee have any other announcements?
Yes, Madam Chair, just in recognition of tabling things and sending things to policy subcommittee, our next policy subcommittee meeting is Tuesday, June 26th at 6:30 in the superintendent's conference room at the Bridgewater Middle School, doing business as Mitchell at the Middle.
Very good, thank you very much. Anyone else?
6:30. Oh, yes, that's Monday.
Now, we have a school building committee meeting for the Mitchell Elementary School this coming Monday. It's the following, it's this coming Monday?
It's the
18th, at the Academy Building in the Town Council Chambers at 6:30.
Very good.
That is an open meeting.
Anyone else have any other announcements? Very good. Motion to adjourn at 8:25. Motion by Ms. Marrera, second by Mrs. Soparis. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So voted. Thank you very much, everyone.